Big news for Donald Trump. All the evidence is showing, whatever the media tells you, all the evidence is showing that Donald Trump is on track to win the 2024 presidential election. I know. If you watch the news, if you scroll on your phone, if you're looking on major news websites, you're going to see all of these stories, a cascade, a flood of stories talking about how Kamala Harris is building momentum, how she's so popular, how everyone is behind her, they love her. The Obamas, they're just practically in tears. They're so excited for Kamala Harris. This is all propaganda. This isn't real. Whether you like Kamala Harris or not, the reality is the reality. And the evidence shows pretty clearly Kamala Harris is on track to lose the 2024 election. And I'm going to show you some really interesting numbers, poll numbers, and not just your standard political poll stuff. We're going to take a look at older poll numbers, compare it to newer poll numbers. We're going to look at some stuff that isn't just about Trump versus Harris, and give you a real sense of why I think that the big news story right now, in American politics anyway, is that Kamala Harris is going to lose in a landslide to Donald Trump based on the evidence we have today. Now, that could change, obviously. We're not at Election Day. Election Day in political terms is light years away into the future. But if the election were held right now, or even, I would say, within the next month or so, I'd put my money on Donald Trump winning. I'm not saying I'm rooting for that to happen. I'm not saying I'm not, but I'm not saying that I'm rooting for that. I'm just saying if we're going to take an analytical approach to all of this, that's what the evidence shows. So let's dive into the numbers. I'm Justin Haskins. Thank you for watching the Justin Haskins Show, or listening if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or another podcast platform. Welcome to the show. Please do me a favor. Please stop whatever you're doing right now and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like this video, leave a comment. If you're listening to the podcast version, then please subscribe to the podcast. All of these things are going to help this show reach more people. Not just make it easier for you to find out when new episodes are happening, but also for others as well, because big tech algorithms rely on likes, comments, shares, and subscriptions to decide whether or not they're going to push a show out to other subscribers. And the show is still very new. I'm still just building up the audience. So the more people who subscribe, leave comments to the video and the audio version of the show, the better off the show is going to be. We can help build a community of listeners and watchers so that we can be better informed and have a better sense of what's going on in the world. So thanks for that. If you haven't done it, please, what are you waiting for? Are you a communist? I hope not. Please, if you're not a communist, subscribe, leave a comment. All right, let's get into the numbers. This is if you're a Trump fan, this is going to make you feel pretty good. I'm just going to tell you that right off the bat. So first, we're going to start off with stuff that's not going to make you feel good if you're a Trump fan. These are the 2020 presidential election results. This is from 270towin.com. And what we're looking at here is the actual map. This is what happened in 2020. As you can see, it was an electoral college landslide for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, 306 to 232. But in reality, this whole race was a lot closer than a lot of people realize. The three closest states in 2020 were Arizona, over here is 11 electoral college votes, Georgia, 16 electoral college votes, and most people thought Georgia was a guaranteed win for Donald Trump. So it was really surprising when that didn't go for him. And then Wisconsin with 10. All three of these states combined were decided by fewer than 50,000 votes. So 50,000 votes combined over those three states determined who would win the election. So for Donald Trump to win, for Donald Trump to win the race, as you're about to see in a second here, all he needs to do is flip these three states. So just watch this. See, Arizona goes red, Georgia goes red, Wisconsin goes red, and it's 269-269. which is a tie. But a tie is decided ultimately by the House of Representatives based on the single vote for delegations among the states. So each state House delegation gets one vote. Because Republicans control more House delegations, they would probably elect Donald Trump. But as you can see, electoral college votes change. I did a whole video on this topic a while back. Check that out if you get a chance. I'll leave a link in the show notes so that you can find it if you don't know what to look for. But the electoral college votes shifted a little bit from the time the 2020 election occurred to the 2024 election because of the way that the census is done. And then you have the House of Representatives is reapportioned. And when they do reapportionment for the House of Representatives to decide who gets, because there's a cap on the number of members in the House, it's 435. So every 10 years or so, they reapportion the 435 among the states based on population. When they do that, they adjust the Electoral College because the Electoral College is based on the House of Representatives in large parts, based on the House of Representatives and where those congressional seats are apportioned. So when they did congressional reapportionment this last time around, it changed the election map. So instead of it being 269 to 269, which would probably result in Donald Trump winning anyway, if Arizona, Wisconsin, and Georgia were to flip, just those three states, you look at 2024 results, you can see that in the event that occurs, you would have 272 to 266. Donald Trump wins outright. No tie. Okay? So this is the Electoral College map changing made it a little bit easier for Donald Trump to win. Actually made it a lot easier for Donald Trump to win. Again, go watch that video that I did last time and you can see why that is. It's not just because of this. There's other things as well. But this has set Donald Trump up to only need to flip those three states. As long as he flips those three states and wins all the states that he won the last time in 2020, he's going to win the election. So the question is, can he flip these three states? You know, he's got to flip all three of them. Or if he's not going to flip these three, then he's got to flip maybe Michigan or maybe Pennsylvania or something. And then that would change the dynamics of all of this. But the easiest three states to flip are Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. So the question is he going to flip them? Right? I believe the answer to that question is emphatically yes, based on the evidence that we have so far. And again, it's early, but based on the evidence that we have so far. So the first thing I want to do is I want you to take a look at the 2024 Real Clear Politics general election outcomes that we have so far. So these are national polls. Sometimes they're likely voters. Sometimes they're national polls of registered voters. And what you see from these polls are pretty clear. Donald Trump is winning sometimes handedly, but at least by a point or two in the majority of the polls. Now, there is one poll that shows Kamala Harris winning by 4. That's the only poll of recent polls available that have Harris winning by more than 1. But that's a Daily Kos Civics poll of registered voters. And frankly, I just think it's probably not a very good poll. Daily Kos is extremely biased. Registered voters is not a good group of people to poll. You want to poll likely voters. Likely voters are people who say, I'm not just registered to vote, but I'm planning on voting. If you're just asking registered voters, you have no idea whether these people are likely voters or not. So you could be calling somebody on the phone or doing an online poll or something, and you're asking someone's opinion who hasn't voted since, the 1980s. So registered voter poll, generally speaking, are not as accurate as likely voters. So all the likely voter polls here show Trump winning. There's one here from the New York Times, Siena, that was taken in late July. That shows Trump up by 1. There's the likely voter poll from Rasmussen of 2,163. That's a big poll. That was conducted over a full week. So really good. Low margin of error. Has Trump up 5 points against Harris. That is incredible. And so when you look at this, yeah, there are a couple of polls in here, a Reuters Ipsos poll and a Morning Consult poll that show Harris up by 1. But there's registered voter polls from left-wing outfits that show Trump up by 4, like this one, a Harvard Harris poll, 726 to 728, 2,196 registered voters, a 2.1 margin of error. That's a really good poll in terms of the margin of error. And Trump is up 4. And so when you're looking at these polls and you're seeing polls from CNN, Trump up 3, NPR, Trump up 1, Harvard, Trump up 4, like these are not right-wing institutions, and they're showing Trump winning slightly. Now you could say, okay, well, all right, it's a slight upper hand for Trump, but Kamala Harris just got in the race, and maybe she's building some momentum, and maybe we're on track for Kamala to win. The problem with that is national polls really aren't a great way of determining what the outcome of the election is going to be. And the reason for that, of course, is because of the Electoral College. The Electoral College is not a national popular vote. So it doesn't necessarily matter if Harris wins the popular vote by 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. What matters is what happens in the states, right? That's how this election is all going to shape up. So the last presidential election, as I mentioned before, let me pull that up for you. The last presidential election here in 2020, when you're looking at this map, although Biden won by millions of votes, he only won by 50,000 votes combined when you factor in the Electoral College, because Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, those 3 states would have flipped things in favor of Donald Trump, and it was only a 50,000 vote margin. So Kamala Harris can't rely on national polls, right? It's all about state. It's all about how she's doing in the states. But there's really good reason to believe that although it shows a close race with Trump getting a slight edge in the polls that we have so far in 2024, it's actually a lot worse than this. Because when you go back and you look at historic polling with Donald Trump in particular, because Donald Trump's a weird presidential candidate, you go back and you look at the historic polls, what you find is that Trump up by 1, Trump up by 2, Trump up by 5, Trump up by 4. These are way better results than anything Donald Trump was getting in 2020 when he barely lost, and in 2016 when he barely won. Okay? In a lot of the polls, we weren't seeing results like this for Donald Trump. So let's go back and take a look, for example, at the final set of polls in 2020. Let's pull that up. This is the 2020 general election, Trump versus Biden. These are 4-way polls, so because these are the polls that you want. And what it shows here is, look at these numbers. Economist YouGov. This is end of October into November. Biden up 10. Investors Business Daily, TIPP, Biden up 10. Oh, wait, sorry. Biden up 10 in the Economist YouGov. The IBD TIPP poll, Biden up 4. Reuters Ipsos, Biden up 7. CNBC / Change Research, Biden up 10. Rasmussen had Biden up only by 1. Quinnipiac had Biden up 11. NBC News / Wall Street Journal, Biden 10. Fox News, Biden 8. Biden 8. Biden 4. Biden 5. You get the point. Biden was winning huge. And what this translated, and this is why this is so important, this translated to Trump barely losing the Electoral College. So when you look at these numbers and you say, okay, Biden on average is up by 7 and he barely wins the Electoral College, and then you fast forward to the 2024 polls and it's Biden up by, Trump up by 1.2. And in that skewed by this Daily Kos Civics poll, which I think is a joke, you see Trump is like polling 8 points or more higher, better than he did in 2020 right before the election. So what this all means is the numbers seem to indicate that if the election were held right now, there's a really good chance that Joe Biden would win. That Donald Trump would win and that Kamala Harris would lose. That's what it seems to show based on what we have in front of us right now. But there's more than just these head-to-head matchup polls to look at. There's other stuff too. When you start looking at some of the issue polling, you realize that Kamala is on the wrong side of almost all of the major issues that voters care about. And that may not matter at this very moment when people are still learning about who Kamala Harris is. All they really know about her right now is she's got a weird cackle laugh that nobody likes. She doesn't have a very likable personality, and that she's part of a failing administration that really isn't very popular with voters. Now, that's all bad news for Kamala Harris. Okay. But when they start learning about her actual policy positions, which are crazy, like really, really crazy, then they're going to like her even less than they do right now. And I think these poll numbers for Trump are likely to improve. And for Harris, they're likely to go down. I don't think people are going to like Kamala more the more they learn about her, because on issues, she's actually worse than she seems at first glance. I'll give you an example of this. Recently, the Heartland Institute, whom I work for, produced a poll with Rasmussen Reports. And I helped write the poll with Rasmussen. And we actually released a bunch of polls, and there's a lot of really incredible stuff in there. I'm going to do some more videos on those in the future. But for right now, I just want to focus on this one. We did this poll that talked about swing state voters. So these were, we conducted a really large poll of voters. Let me see here how many it was. We got the number in here somewhere. 5,605 voters in battleground states. These are likely voters: Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So these are the voters that are going to decide the election. All right. And we asked these voters what they thought about a bunch of different issues. This particular poll is focusing on oil and gas and energy and climate change and things of that nature. Okay. So I just want to use this as an example. There are other things that we could point to, but I just want to use this as the example to prove the point. And what we found was incredible. Roughly 6 in 10 battleground state likely voters favor a law that would, quote, dramatically increase fossil fuel production to reduce sky-high energy prices. So here's the actual question we ask. Would you support or oppose a law that would reduce gasoline and energy prices by dramatically increasing oil and gas drilling in the United States? 44% of likely voters said they, in swing states, we're just talking about in the swing states, the ones that matter, 44% of them said they strongly support, compared to strongly oppose was 17. So 44 to 17. Somewhat support was 19%, compared to somewhat oppose was only 12. So when you add strongly support and somewhat support together, you get 63% of voters. 63%. I mean, that is incredible. So this headline up here that says nearly 6 in 10 battleground state likely voters favor a law that would dramatically increase fossil fuel production. That's actually not right. It's more than 6 in 10. It's 63% say they would somewhat favor or strongly support or somewhat support a law that would dramatically increase oil and gas drilling. Well, how does Kamala Harris? What is her position on that? Well, she supports the Green New Deal. She supports phasing out all oil and gas drilling in 10 years. That's her position. Well, once people learn about that in these swing states, do you think they're going to like that or not like that? Right? And there are a whole bunch of other issues where it's the same kind of thing. So again, put this into perspective, right? Let's think about this clearly. As people learn more about Kamala Harris, are they more likely to support her or are they less likely to support her? And as they, in these battleground states, learn more about her energy policies, for example, or her position on Ukraine. A majority of voters we asked about cutting off aid to Ukraine. A majority of voters said they don't want any more aid for Ukraine. Okay. So whether it's Ukraine, it's energy, it's inflation, whatever name the big issues. On almost all of the big issues, voters in battleground states are saying, we agree with Donald Trump's positions, we don't agree with Kamala Harris. Okay, and then when you factor that in with the poll numbers that we're seeing that show that Trump is winning in these head-to-head matchups, and then you factor in how that plays with the 2020 election, how that compares with 2020, and you see Trump barely lost, even though Biden was up huge in the polls in a lot of these states. What does that tell you? What it tells you is that all of the polling that's coming out right now is indicating that Donald Trump is highly likely to win on the issues, on Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's record, and on the future direction of the country. This is what people want, it seems. Again, maybe this isn't what happens. I don't know. But it looks right now like Kamala Harris is in really, really bad shape. So before we wrap things up, I just want to play with some scenarios here to illustrate the point. All right. So just take a look at these maps. At the map. This is the 2024 map. We're going to reset it. This is the 2024 map. And what it shows is these are the battleground states right here. They actually have Georgia as leaning Republican. We're going to make that a toss-up. So take a look at the battleground states here. In order for the Democrats to win, they already begin at a 9 electoral college vote deficit, just based on where the map appears to be before you start playing with the swing states. So Republicans already have a huge advantage. If Donald Trump does well just in the upper Midwest and fails pretty much everywhere else, Donald Trump wins. Okay, we're at 279. Doesn't matter what happens in these other states. We're at 279. Okay, so there's a pathway right there for Donald Trump. If Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania, wins Wisconsin, but loses Michigan, let's say, loses Nevada, as he's done the last couple elections, loses Arizona, but wins Georgia, Trump wins. Okay, well, let's say Trump loses Pennsylvania and loses Michigan, right? But he wins Wisconsin and he wins Georgia. Trump is still barely losing. So this would be a pathway for success for Kamala Harris right here. But if Wisconsin goes blue and Michigan goes red, then all of a sudden it's only a 2-vote difference. And this one electoral college vote in Nebraska and this one electoral college vote in Nebraska, coupled with perhaps one of these other states here, could be a big factor. You could also have this Nevada here. If Nevada flipped, right now Trump's polling really well in Nevada, then even if he loses Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, as long as he wins Georgia, and he could lose Arizona too, he still wins because of Nevada. In Arizona, if he wins Arizona and he wins Georgia and he wins Michigan, it doesn't matter what happens in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Nevada. So you can see that when you start playing with the map, obviously Donald Trump could lose. Like, there's just no doubt about that. Donald Trump could lose. But there's a lot of ways for Donald Trump to win. Pennsylvania, for example, if Trump loses in Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, so he's losing most of the swing states, but he just wins Pennsylvania and Georgia, then Trump wins 270 to 268. So again, when you're factoring in the electoral college map really favoring Trump because he starts already with a lead before you even get to the swing states, he already has a slight edge. You factor in the changes to the electoral college that happened in 2020 to 2024, where there's a little bit of a swing in favor of the Republicans. You factor in the polling numbers that show that Trump is way outperforming what he did in 2020, what you end up with is a picture that seems to indicate that Donald Trump is highly, highly likely to win the 2024 presidential election. Now, what is this? Does this mean, for sure that Trump is going to win? No, of course not. Anytime you're talking about a 50,000 vote difference in 2020, or less than 50,000 vote difference between three states, anything is possible. The other big wild card that everybody needs to keep in mind is RFK Jr. RFK Jr. was not running in 2020, so he wasn't a factor. He, in some of these polls, is polling really, really well. And as a result of him polling really, really well, depending on where his support comes from, it could dramatically impact the race. So it just depends on so many different factors. This is seriously the hardest election to predict in modern American history. I mean, 2016 was a really tough race to predict. 2020 was a really tough race to predict. But because of RFK Jr., because of the assassination attempt on Donald Trump's life, because of Joe Biden dropping out of the race, because of Kamala Harris, we don't really know what voters think of her, generally speaking. All we have is polling. She was really unpopular in the primaries, didn't come anywhere near winning the Democratic nomination for, I don't even think she made it to a single state. She had no delegates in the Democratic primary process. Because we don't have any of this information. It's just numerous unprecedented situations here, all converging into one thing. Donald Trump being convicted of crimes in New York. What do people think of that? These felonies, these 34 felonies, did they believe it? Did they not believe it? All of these things coming together to create this perfect storm of mayhem when you're trying to predict the outcome of this election. There's just no way to do it. But with all of that said, the big news for Donald Trump right now is it really does look like, when you look at issue polling, like I showed you before from Heartland and Rasmussen, and you look at the head-to-head matchups and you compare it to what we saw in 2020, and you compare the Electoral College changes and the Electoral College map from 2020 to 2024, and you add all that together, it looks like Donald Trump is in amazing shape to win the race. So let me know how you feel about that. Maybe that makes you miserable. I don't know. Maybe you're excited. Maybe you're really excited about the November election. No matter how you're feeling, leave a comment. I read the comments. I really appreciate all of them. Like the video, share the video with friends and family, subscribe to the channel, hit the little notifications button on YouTube if you're watching the YouTube version of the show, so that you make sure that you're getting all the content that I'm posting. And until next time, I'm Justin Haskins. Please stay free.